Welcome, Ramesh.
Thank you, Mike. It's good to be here. Gene, it's good to see you again.
Good
Welcome,
to see you
Gene.
as
Yep.
well, Ramesh. Thank you.
Okay, and what's interesting, we're gonna talk about a couple different things here, but I'll just tell the audience that one of the reasons we've got you both here today, someone Amazon and Equinix, is that there's a partnership and there's a combined value proposition, and we're going to get to that and really dig into that first. But let's start by just talking a little bit about what you see going on in the hybrid cloud space. What are people trying to do, and where are we at on people's cloud transformations? Are they trying to get 100% in the cloud? Are they repatriating? Are they ending up somewhere in the middle? Let's start with you, Ramesh, from that Amazon perspective. What do you guys see in terms of hybrid cloud development?
Hey, first of all, Mike, it's great to be here. Thank you for
Yeah.
having me and giving us this opportunity to talk about a subject that's very passionate to us all. We recognize that even today, the cloud is a very significant portion of enterprise IT and enterprise cloud computing. However, 85% of IT workloads are still running in some form of a data center, some type of, either customer-based data center or a colo. And customers are using the cloud, and what they are looking for is a common set of tools, the same reliability, the same security, the same set of APIs. So they don't wish to operate multi-environments with different set of basic underlying features. So their teams are innovating at the same pace. They are able to learn at the same pace. They are able to serve their customers in that same ubiquitous manner, whether they are located closer to a cloud or they are local to a data center. So that's kind of the common platform that we are seeing. And as you see the pressures and the innovations that are moving at a very rapid pace, especially when you talk about Gen AI applications that are coming on, the more of AI ML type applications that are happening, the challenges that are there from putting learning models at the edge infrastructure, all of those are creating more of an innovative and new space that is allowing nimble companies to come in and innovate very quickly using the cloud, yet at the same time deploying services and solutions at the far edge, at the customer's location, or closer to the customer's location. So that's pretty much the thesis from where we are coming from. And we don't expect that pace of innovation to slow down. We expect that as more and more preponderance of Gen AI type applications are coming in, you will see a lot more consumption on all across the board. So, when you talk about hybrid, that's where we see customers really going towards.
All right. So, if I'm thinking about Amazon, and we're going to get into some of the technologies that allow you to extend that out here in a second. But I do think of a cloud service provider, and then when I talk to you, Gene, about Equinix, you guys are sort of right in the middle there of being able to bring services and data connections and other things to the customer. Maybe you just explain a little bit about where you guys fit into this evolving hybrid architecture.
Yeah, definitely. So again, pleasure to be here, Mike. Thanks for having us. Yeah, so Equinix, we're right in the middle of things, right? We have a distributed edge model where we have about 250 data centers globally, and so to Ramesh's point, 85% or even more of customers are still residing in legacy data centers. As those customers decide to get out of their own data center business, they start to look at how they can maybe move their infrastructure to an environment such as Equinix, where they can co-locate their infrastructure in a environmentally safe place where it's secure. They have interconnection to thousands of network providers that can get them anywhere in the world, and especially being able to connect to AWS is a very important part of that. I see two sides of how customers are getting to a hybrid cloud scenario. The first one we look at is Ramesh had just mentioned, these customers are looking at closing down their legacy data centers and moving infrastructure into companies such as Equinix. But the other part of it is you have a number of customers that were born in the cloud, right? So they started out greenfield inside of AWS, and that's really all they know. But now they need they have to scale their business in ways that meet the needs of their business, and they need to bring some of that infrastructure back inside of a data center provider such as Equinix. For a myriad of reasons, right? It could be data sovereignty, data residency. There's a number of different issues that come up that we're able to provide assistance on
Yeah,
and
let's
meet
talk
the
a
needs
little.
of those customers.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about some of that motivation, because if we think just abstractly, we should be able to get great performance no matter where we're at. But that's not always true, right? We need to be operating closer to where our data is, and our data isn't always in one place or another. Performance would be an issue and something I've spent a lot of my years looking at. But you mentioned data residency and sovereignty, governance. What are some of the key issues that's pushing someone more towards a hybrid architecture than just landing one place or the other?
Yeah, so well, specifically when it comes to hybrid connectivity to AWS, for example, customers are looking for low latency, connectivity to AWS cloud, to specific regions or even local zones. They're looking for high throughput. And we've done, third-party lab testing with independent companies to kind of look at how customers connect to AWS and other entities. And more commonly, a lot of customers over the last several decades have been using, internet connectivity to do that, which has been great. I mean, most people do have internet connections available to them, and it's a very, fast, efficient way to connect. However, when they start to look at larger workloads, such as Ramesh mentioned, Gen AI, heavy workloads that require a lot of throughput data, passing from one end to the other in a very efficient, fast manner. And they need to have it done in a low latency, right? Because if you look at if you're operating on your computer, you're getting low latency right there from your fingertips on your keyboard. However, if you're trying to do the same type of work from a long distance, for example, those keystrokes may take longer to get across the wire, right? So that's just a brief example of what customers are looking at when it comes to their application performance. Their applications perform much better when they have a low latency connection, high throughput bandwidth. And so then we're looking at leveraging dedicated connections to AWS, such as AWS Direct Connect, for example, is a great way for customers to be able to connect back to AWS to get that performance, that low latency. And then, from a data residency and sovereignty standpoint, those are really, regulatory type of issues that each country around, the globe may have specific requirements around that. The data has to be, in the country, it has to be, looked at from a regulatory standpoint, that where they can come in and observe where the data actually exists.
All right, so we want to process data locally. We've got some sovereignty issues, governance issues that drive us here. Security is something I'm sure we're going to talk about here in a second. So, Ramesh, I just wanted to understand a little bit on the Amazon offering. You've got a lot of local zones for performance, right, around the world. Can you just describe that a little bit so people fully understand, how they can get good performance just being in the cloud?
So yeah, and first of all, I echo what Gene just said. So if you look at AWS customers today, worldwide we have 33 regions today. All of those are public cloud regions. And then as we notice that customers need for being closer to the infrastructure edge because of low latency, data gravity, data sovereignty, and also their own journey to the cloud, we put up these edge infrastructures called local zones. Today we have 34 of them. The most recent one was in Honolulu a couple of weeks ago. And these are edge infrastructures. They do not have all of the services that we have in a region, but they have a microcosm of that. And then working with a partner like EQINX, we provide other types of services that can actually be brought into that particular infrastructure, which is closer to that customer's edge. So for instance, if the customer is looking at low latency and they are 500 miles away from a region, but if they have an edge infrastructure which is only 50 miles away, the latency in that is going to be cut short by a significant amount. So you can go from anywhere from a 200 millisecond type of a latency down to about 20 milliseconds, which is far more acceptable for them in order to not only run their own internal CI/CD processes, but also, depending on the industry that they are in, serving their customers and serving their end customers as well. One point that we recognize here is the regulated nature of the industry that they operate in. So if you're talking about healthcare, or you're talking about financials, or you're talking about gaming, where there are more than PII data that cannot leave. For instance, if you're storing credit card information, it cannot leave that particular data center. And it needs to have an ability for the regulator to come in and audit whatever is happening there at any given instant. So when customers are operating with that type of a regulated model, they need to have the ability to work with AWS across the board. So we think of it as an AWS everywhere concept. So you have regions, we have over 600 POPs worldwide, and then you have 34 edge locations in local zones. And then for those customers who want to bring it down even closer to home, being in their own data center or in a co-located facility like EQINX, then we have AWS Outposts, which I'm sure we'll be talking about in a few minutes, which is an infrastructure that is purely for a customer of one, that is built for them, and it resides in their own location or in a co-located facility.
I definitely want to talk about Outpost. I just want to ask Gene, what are your customers looking for performance? Ramesh mentioned some millisecond numbers there. What's the difference to somebody between 5 milliseconds and 40 milliseconds, for example? What does that mean to a business?
Well, it means everything to some businesses, right? So especially if you're looking at, for example, like high performing databases, right? Again, back to Ramesh, talked about it. There's the difference between 40 milliseconds and just a couple milliseconds is could be a huge delay, right? In getting responses back from your applications. Doing business in general, and you're looking at high efficiency trading, for example, those trades need to happen in microseconds sometimes, and so that means everything to those businesses, because it's revenue. It comes down to revenue processing, orders for trades. Again, online gaming is another example. We see a lot of gaming companies that are doing multi-platform games where they're, have players that are all participating. They need to have low latency so that they have the ability to play the game in a way that they're not having to have any kind of delay or performance issues. And so that kind of brings things back to our hybrid cloud scenario, and being able to have that connectivity right at the edge between our two companies, right? So Equinix can provide the connectivity to AWS in a way that we can limit the amount of latency between the two companies.
And that generally falls, Ramesh, under direct connect. What we're talking about there, right?
Yes, and there's also one more point. I mean, sometimes it's not just about the economics. It's also about if you're operating in a healthcare environment, think about image processing that needs to happen. So you talked about what's the difference between 5 milliseconds and 40 milliseconds. And if you're administering telemedicine to a corner of the world where you do not have that ability or the luxury, it could be a matter of, I would say, maybe not just saving a limb, but also maybe saving a life for the practitioner who's administering that. And if they have that edge infrastructure closer to them, 5 and 40 milliseconds could be a matter of life.
Yeah, I mean, if someone's operating on me, I definitely want them to have the best performance available on the planet, right? That's not something to mess around with. We talked, and you mentioned something about Outpost here. So I think a lot of people may be familiar with Equinix's role in building a hybrid cloud with direct connect and getting to the local zones, and kind of being able to imagine that. But let's talk a little bit more then about Outpost. What does Outpost consist of, and how does that look from a customer who's bringing that in?
Certainly. So Outpost is a fully managed AWS service, which is built for a customer of one, and it is an infrastructure that is in the customer's own data center or in an Equinix co-located data center. And the way to look at this, Mike, is we have customers who are quite happy, in fact, very happy using our region services. And then they have certain applications that need to be closer to their edge, and they go to a local zone for those types of workloads. And then there are some applications that the same customer runs, which by nature of either their industry being regulated or by nature of the data that they are handling needs to be in a certain specific location, which sometimes they may even mandate, like it cannot leave between 4th Street and Fifth Street. It has to be in building A. And those types of regulations are only met when you have that type of cloud infrastructure available in that particular location. So the Outpost is a very unique value proposition from AWS, which allows us to bring our cloud infrastructure and make it happen and make it work for that customer in that particular data center. So of course, it won't have all of the 200 plus services that we offer in the region. It'll be a set of services that are most important for those customers in that particular location. So it comes with compute, storage, memory, ability to have some relationship databases in there, load balancing, cache, and all the other services that go with that. But we work with each of those customers with those unique needs and tailor the infrastructure to what their needs are and also what the nature of their workloads are. And working with EQINX, we have several customers who have their outposts, in their location, and we have a seasoned familiarity in terms of what is needed to launch such customers. And we have learned over the years on how to do that very efficiently.
Right. So you're really bringing your cloud to the customer in this case, right? So instead of even meeting them, not even really meeting them halfway, you're going all the way to where that customer is. Gene, though, I know you guys do colos, right? That's a little part of your business. How does this Outpost fit into that strategy of providing services, co-location services to folks?
Yeah, it fits extremely well. These devices, the Outposts from Amazon, come fully equipped, right? So they have a full cabinet of gear, and those can be scaled out, either kind of like a t-shirt size, small, medium, and large type of ability, but they can also deploy what are called AWS Outpost servers, and they're individual servers that are 1U and 2U devices that will slide right into a co-location cabinet that Equinix has for like a shared environment as well. So we can kind of meet the demands of any type of customer that Amazon would like to have co-locate their equipment inside of Equinix facilities. And then from there, we would work with our account teams and our sales engineer experts to design power and space for these customers, depending on how many devices, how many Outpost devices they want to bring into our facilities for their specific workloads and their needs. And we'll make sure that those devices are, powered up, secure, maintained from a cooling and HVAC perspective. And so we're able to, fully support any type of customer coming from Amazon for AWS Outposts.
All right. So that's go ahead, Ramesh.
No, the one thing to add is that Outposts are still a fully managed service. So in order to run the infrastructure, we do need gear. That's why, when Gene alluded to the gear that we ship is a completely fully managed infrastructure from AWS. It's not a hardware type of a product. It is actually a service. And so we fully manage it from end to end. We have alarms, bells, and whistles in there to alert us if a service is going to degrade or is going to go down. We make sure that never happens, and we actually do replacements. Should a server, these are hardware pieces, like we do it in our data center, customer never realizes it, but we swap these things out quite rapidly. So we do that. The customer runs their services, and what they are responsible for are the services that are running on an Outpost. So it is same security that we have in the region, the same IAM rules that apply, but it's all performant in that local infrastructure.
Yeah, I did want to touch on security. So, and maybe both of you could address this. If someone's really concerned about security these days, how does Outpost and Equinix help them enhance their security domain?
So first of all, the security in an Outpost is, it's the same secure, safe infrastructure that we have in our region service. So if a customer is just consuming from the region, they are as safe as, and their data is as secure as it would be in the region. It's exactly the same ethos. It is the same philosophy, and we don't deter from that. That's why the rules around how we deploy and what we do with the outpost is very stringent. It's run by us. It's deployed by Blue Badge AWS folks. It is not outsourced to anybody. And as a result, we are able to ensure that before that customer starts loading their workloads onto an outpost, that it functions exactly the way it should be functioning. So that type of hygiene is already factored in and is part of the outpost story, and that's how we launch it. From an Equinix perspective, I'm going to let Gene answer that because the fact that we work with them so closely, and I'm always in awe of their data centers, so I'm going to let him answer that.
Yeah, and I have some friends who are CISOs, and they're just really concerned day in and day out about protecting everything. So, tell us about that a little bit, Gene.
Yeah, so Equinix goes to great lengths from the security standpoint, right? I mean, our logo itself is built to be a fortress. So taking that into consideration, when customers come into an Equinix data center, first thing they'll notice is that all our data centers look and feel the same from an entry perspective and coming into them. But then right away, you'll notice that we have security guards that are always present on site. We use biometrics to gain access to our facilities. So customers will have to have, be built into that system to be able granted access into our facilities. And then from a Outpost perspective, whether you're in a shared environment inside of Equinix or you're in your own private environment. So what I mean by that is that the fully equipped outposts are more commonly placed inside of a secure cage, right? And so you'll have 4 walls, a cage with a door, and you'll be able to have biometric access to your environment, but you're the only ones that are granted access into that and out of that. Our operational techs will, have access to that, but they'll only be granted access on behalf of the customer or Amazon to enter into that cage. And so from that perspective, we take great strides in making sure all of our customers are secure and taken care of from that perspective.
Yeah, it's when we talk about hybrid architectures, generally, sometimes we're talking about making a lot of compromises either way. But it sounds like here we're able to start to take full advantage of the best of what we can get out of the Amazon cloud and the best of what Equinix can do for someone by, just basically securing things, hosting things, connecting things with speed. I also wanted to ask Gene a little bit about how fast does it take to get up to speed? How fast does it take to bring someone on board if they want to spin up an outpost for themselves?
Well, it really depends on, first of all, the customer is going to work with Amazon to order the AWS Outposts. Okay. And depending on, how they want to set up their outposts, that can dictate maybe how much time it would take for Amazon to, complete that order. And then once that outpost is shipped to our facility, we usually pre-prepare the space for the outpost to come in. So it could take as little as a few weeks, or it could take, a few months, depending on how the outpost needs to be designed, how many outposts are coming into our facility at any given time. So it can really depend on that. If it's an outpost server, for example, those can be done very quickly. We can, depending on how fast Amazon can ship those to us, our technicians can populate those very quickly in weeks' time.
And you're taking care of all the networking and the routing and switching and all that stuff, right? That's not something that the enterprise customer has to do.
That's correct. So the customer would work with our account team to order all the connectivity that's necessary. We would have dedicated solution architects to their account, dedicated sales engineers to their account to make sure that we're designing the right solution for these customers. And again, Equinix has its own global network called Equinix Fabric, and we provide direct connect both on a dedicated perspective. So, just a piece of single mode fiber running from the customer's outpost directly to Amazon. And then we have what is called hosted direct connect, which leverages our fabric. So we're a partner of Amazon's for direct connect. And that allows a customer to get a port on our Equinix Fabric and then spin up a direct connect from that using a VLAN directly to AWS. So we have a couple different options that customers can leverage when it comes to connecting for dedicated connectivity to AWS to support their outposts.
Right. And so, Ramesh, did you have anything to add on onboarding?
Yeah, of course. And I want to also, from a security perspective, Amazon and AWS, we are extremely passionate about the security of our data centers. And you can imagine the stringency with which we would actually allow our infrastructure to be in any location. Given the, how strong Equinix is in that aspect, you can imagine why we have such a partnership in place, because we have that trust between both partners, where we know that if a customer is putting it into a Equinix data center, it is going to be highly secure. It's going to be as good as our own infrastructure. So there is a huge amount of trust built in between us when we deploy those. From a timeline perspective, to Gene's point, it is completely, each outpost is customized. So there's not a cookie cutter. It's not like sitting on a shelf that we ship these out. We build it to that customer spec. And so, depending on what that workload is, it takes a few weeks. It can take sometimes up to 8 weeks to deliver that. And then once that is delivered and, install takes another maybe a couple of weeks sometimes. And then depending on the number of outpost racks that they have ordered, it can take a moderately higher amount of time. The difference between these form factors, we keep talking about Outposts, the rack and, how secure it is and it's a cage, etc. And then we talked about the Outpost service. So we launched Outpost 5 years ago in that 42U format, which is industry standard. And it comes in that cage. It's got its own security locks. And for some reason, let's say that there is a break-in, the customer can easily destroy the data that is contained in there with a flip of a switch. They have an ability to do that. So all of that data is encrypted, everything gets destroyed, nothing is going to go anywhere. So their data is extremely protected from that standpoint. Servers were introduced 3 years ago. We announced them. We started shipping them a couple of years ago. In the case of the Outposts, the 42Us, I had mentioned that AWS Blue Badges actually come in and implement it. It's our technicians who come and do all of that work. With the servers, it is done by either the customer or our partner Equinix in their colo. So we walk them through that. It's remotely done, and it's much easier, simpler. It's just a server that has to be turned on and for their workloads. So that's kind of the time taken is really dependent upon the workload, the type of applications that the customer is running in that edge infrastructure.
All right, so as edge infrastructure, I can get server-size outposts, but I can also get data center-sized outposts in the 42 racks. So that's all custom done, which is pretty interesting to think together. I want to sort of also ask you. You mentioned a little bit. Maybe I'm not getting everything that Amazon has to offer in an outpost. Could you just give us a thumbnail of what I can do in an outpost?
Of course. And again, there's a distinction between what's offered on the rack and the 42Us versus the pizza-sized boxes of 1Us and 2Us. So the outposts, the racks, they have 14 services today. So from compute, memory, storage, plus you have load balancing, you have the ability to run databases. And then, if you have needs for load balancing, like I said, you can do application load balancing. There are some Elasticache services that are available. And we most recently announced a couple of weeks ago disaster recovery services that are available on Outpost racks. The servers, on the other hand, are pure compute. They are 1U and 2U sizes. The 1U is a Graviton-based chip. The 2U is x86 2U box. And the difference is really horsepower. They both have compute, but that's all they have. They run linear compute. A lot of our customers are looking for only compute capability at that edge infrastructure. They have their own ability to either deliver any type of storage that they need over there, and they work on that themselves. But all we are doing with the 1U and the 2U boxes is giving them the same unparalleled type of instances that they need in that 1U and the 2U box for compute.
Yeah, in general, I do see the idea of architecture evolving where data is going to be flowing in towards the middle and aggregating there where it can get some weight and analytics applied to it, and compute being pushed out to the edges. So this fits right into that mental model that I have of the future here. And just to recap, so so we're getting EC2, we're getting S3 services, we're getting
EBS, you're getting ALB, you're getting EMR, you're getting DRS now, you're getting RDS.
I know it's a lot of acronyms, but some of us are more familiar with those. You guys are leading the market there. Okay. And I also, Gina, I want to, something I remember from talking with Equinix before is that direct connect isn't simply a connection just to Amazon. You mentioned it being a fabric. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the advantages that someone has being attached to that larger fabric?
Yeah, so our, like Amazon, they have a global network. So does Equinix. So we have a global network called Equinix Fabric, and we have 58 locations around the globe that customers can connect to our fabric infrastructure. This allows them to be able to connect to Amazon and other entities using that service. As well, they can connect to their own infrastructure across the globe. So, for example, whether you're in the Americas or in EMEA or Asia, you could actually connect your whole global footprint with itself and have a consistent network. Many of our customers use our Equinix Fabric as their primary network. A lot of them use it as a secondary network as well. So whether they're leveraging Amazon's network or another telecommunication network that they have to use for last mile connectivity, they can still leverage our Equinix Fabric to have a consistent network footprint globally. In fact, about close to 70% of our customers are in all three regions. It's kind of a unique number. If you think about Equinix and our 250 data centers globally, we work with a lot of multinational companies that have footprints in all different regions around the globe. And so being able to connect all those companies' assets together to be able to network them together is a big plus for them to be able to leverage Equinix Fabric with Equinix, and also be able to have access, like I said, to companies such as AWS for dedicated connectivity for all the things we mentioned, higher throughput, lower latency. You can also improve your costs using direct connect as well over internet. So typically there's about a 4 to 5x savings on egress costs using AWS Direct Connect versus internet connectivity. So all those things combined makes Equinix Fabric a very appealing network component for a lot of our customers.
Okay, so as we kind of look at this picture, I think we've got this idea now that you two as business partners can deliver to the market this amazing capability to really match any architectural need people have, but let's call it the hybrid architecture, the getting closer to the edge, not just getting up into the cloud kind of perspective. How do you guys you work together, just personally and professionally, view the other company here? How does this partnership really working out for you, and how do you view it as really helping the customer?
Oh, I think it's the power of our partnership that actually brings everything that the customer needs, right? At the end of the day, we have built so much trust between ourselves and with our customers that it's a no-brainer to a lot of customers when they see that an Outpost is going to be in an Equinix data center or they need to use Equinix. For them, it's the aha moment. It's like, hey, both companies have such strong fundamentals and such strong security principles that our data is going to be very secure. We're going to get unmitigated service, and we're going to have a lot of redundancy that is already built into the network, so we don't have to worry about where our data is going and how it is stored and who touches it and who goes, is anybody allowed near it, etc. The other thing is that we have a very strong and mutually respectful relationship where we are very honest with each other. We are not shy to kind of get into a room and roll up the sleeves and go back to the drawing board in order to face any kind of challenges or any complex problems that we are solving for our customer. We have built enough trust between both partnerships where we are able to do that in a very honest and a transparent way. I'd say that, and I think I've been associated personally with Equinix for many, many years. So I could go on and on about it, but I won't. I'll let Gene speak on the other side. So for me, it's merely picking up the phone and calling Gene, and our speed of response is we are connected on everything that you can think of. I mean, we have our own mutual Slack channel. If we miss that, we go on text, we go on email, or we just pick up the phone and call each other. So we have that ability to do that, and not just between the two of us. We have that at every level. And so even within the leadership layer, we can do that. And so we can take on challenges which are not ordinary, and we can solve those complex problems for our customers.
Extraordinary challenges. Gene, how do you, I know he's listening, he's right here, but how do you view Amazon?
No, I echo the same sentiments that Ramesh just talked about. We have a very strong, long-lasting partnership that's developed over the years, starting out with just a few, for example, AWS Direct Connect on-ramps. We actually developed the first Direct Connect on-ramp together back in, I believe it was either 2011 or 2012. I know there's still an old blog out there to this day announcing that very first Direct Connect location in Ashburn, Virginia. And from there, we've grown tremendously together as a partner, and now we have close to 50 on-ramps globally with Amazon for Direct Connect. So that's just an example of the partnership. But to Ramesh's point, every day of the week, we're getting on calls together with our account teams and our customers, and we're trying to come up with solutions to help solve the problems of the customer and what they are trying to accomplish with their business. Because every business is unique and different, and that's the passion that we all both bring to the tables. We love to work with our customers, and we love to solve issues for them that help to scale their business. And so, no, we just had a really strong, tremendous relationship with Amazon, and we'll continue to grow that. And in Ramesh's point, it's really built out of honesty and trust. That's the main components between our relationship. We ultimately trust Amazon and working with them, and their each account team that we work with is unique, but we also honor each other in that way.
Right. We got to kind of wrap up here. We talked a lot about different ways of building hybrid architectures. I hope people are excited to dig a little bit more into Outpost and Direct Connect, and how the business partnership between AWS and Equinix can really serve the largest of global companies in whatever they're trying to do. Let me just ask you this, sort of the final question then. What key takeaway would you like someone to walk away with from this presentation? What a piece of advice, if someone's out there going, yeah, this sounds interesting, maybe what the next steps are, where they should understand their environment. What would you advise be?
Well, again, it starts with the journey, right? If a customer is today, sitting inside their legacy data center, trying to figure out how they want to connect to AWS and other entities, the first thing they want to do is, the question they want to ask is, am I in the data center business, or am I in my own business? And how do I get to a point where I can actually scale my business further? And that's where they can really leverage both AWS and Amazon, as well as Equinix, to achieve their goals by bringing their infrastructure, for example, to AWS and Equinix, and being able to work together and run solutions that meet the needs of their business, so that they can move their business forward. We feel like that's really the starting point, is to recognize that maybe today they're running a monolithic network where everything starts from a certain location and branches out, to coming to Equinix and AWS and look at more of a distributed architecture where they can lower their latency, get better throughput, be able to really evolve their business in ways they haven't thought about before.
And you Ramesh, I guess you get the final words here.
Well, hey, thanks for that. But it's very simple. If your needs are for low latency, you have to meet data residency, data gravity, whether you're in a regulated industry or it's mandated by just the fact that you are in a market where that customer data is extremely precious, and you are in the process of moving to the cloud, and you're just getting started. then the hybrid infrastructure is the way you want to go. Besides, we have to understand that even today, a lot of the data storage is still very much on-prem. And so for those types of customers who want to leverage what they have and have the elasticity of the cloud so that they can burst to the cloud on need basis, having that hybrid infrastructure is very important. And what a better way to go than have the best of both? The number one cloud provider, the number one colo provider in Equinix, and both AWS, Equinix coming together to solve your problem to do that, so that it allows you the same resiliency, the same set of security that you are used to, that hygiene, and also giving you the same tools, the APIs, and giving you the ability to innovate at the same pace that you would be in a differing infrastructure. So there is no better way to do that than looking at this partnership here and using the services from there. And then, at the bottom line is very simple. I mean, all we both are doing is simplifying a customer's IT needs. We are taking the headache out of you. We are taking on that challenge and solving it for you so that you don't have to worry about, instance sizes. You don't have to worry about, if I'm going to expand, what do I do? Or what type of network will I need? You have two partners who are jointly working together to solve that problem.
All right, it's like you're really taking on quite a bit of data center for the customer. We didn't even have time today to get into how applications are evolving to get more complex. We barely mentioned Gen AI and some other things, and some databases. I know, Gene, you brought that up, but business applications are becoming more complex. They're becoming more integrated. They're becoming more distributed. The global. We've got data at the edge. We've got data moving around. We've got compute that has to go out there. So as businesses need to tackle those challenges, it sounds like the partnership here between AWS and Equinix is really going to simplify the back end support of those increasingly complex and challenging workloads.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So thank you for being here today. I think that's all the time we have. Thank you, Ramesh.
Pleasure being here. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Gene.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Gene.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Really appreciate it.